Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, February 5th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, and a special guest. We got Keith Law here, senior baseball writer from The Athletic, good friend of the program. Keith, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It is one of the absolute busiest times of the year for you. The top 100.
Why am I here? I have work to do.
Get stuff to do. You got top 20s rolling out for each organization. I think the entire American League is posted as the time of this recording on Wednesday. So the National League soon.
Yeah, I should probably start writing the National League at some point. So
you get your keyboard fixed, so now you can do it, right?
This is true. I'm actually 60% done with the National League. I have 6 teams left.
You have 6 teams left? Wow.
Yeah. Cardinals and then the NL West, which isn't running until Monday. So I have a little time, but I want to get it done before my older stepdaughter's got a birthday party. And then the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl on Sunday. So I want to get done before all of that.
That's right. The Super Bowl's on Sunday.
Yes, it is.
Be writing on Sunday.
You probably want to keep Sunday free. Huh. Good to know. Thank you for that reminder. I actually forgot that game was on Sunday.
Yes, it is Sunday.
That's the state of my life right now. So we want to talk to you about rookies of interest for this year, players that were very likely to debut at some point in 2025. Many of our listeners play fantasy baseball. Some play long-term formats, and we may get to a few questions about guys who are a few years away. But I think for a lot of people, fantasy players or not, they want to know who's coming up this year, who's going to make an impact. And this year's Golden Claw Award winner, number 1 prospect in baseball on the updated list, is Roman Anthony. Mm-hmm. And I think it makes a lot of sense to start right at the top because Roman Anthony and Kristian Campbell, who's also inside your top 10, both of these guys should fit in the Red Sox lineup sooner rather than later. With the people they already have on the depth chart, we've been wondering what the adjustments are, right? It was kind of easy to see David Hamilton there and say, okay, there's one guy you can push to the bench, but what's the other adjustment and what kind of immediate impact are you expecting from the likes of Anthony and Campbell?
So, I'm of the opinion, I don't know what the Red Sox front office is thinking specifically, but these are 2 guys who are, you make room, right? They're good enough prospects. They've clearly decided they're not trading these guys, right? They traded Kyle Teal. They traded Braden Montgomery. These are part of the guys they're obviously keeping. I'm sure the White Sox asked. And so you got to make room. And to me, Anthony has played center field. I have always thought he'd be a better fit in right. It sounds like he's better in center field than I thought he was going to be. I saw him, I think 2 games last year, not enough to give you a real judgment. But the consensus I've heard is he'd be fine if you left him in center. I happen to think Ceddanne Rafael is one of the best center fielders in baseball if they just put him there and let him play there. And he's not their only center fielder. So to me, it's just easy. You just slide Anthony to one corner or the other. He could play right. If you wanted to play left, obviously left in Boston is challenging. You could try that as well. He's a little bit the easier one to fit. Campbell's best position is probably second base. He has played some shortstop. I get wide-ranging opinions on whether he could play shortstop. I think the consensus is he's just better off at second base. He's also played the outfield, so you could try that as well. Just the point being to get his bat in the lineup. The thing I keep running into is what they really need is somebody who can play shortstop and be healthy, and they don't really have that, right? Trevor Story can play shortstop, but he's obviously been declining and gets hurt all the time. And Ceddanne Rafael can nominally play shortstop, but he's just not good there. I'm pretty sure StatCast had his OAA was pretty bad, and he's never looked like a shortstop to me. The moment I saw him in center field, I'm like, why are we doing anything else? Right? Like if you were born to play center field. So, that's a long way of saying I'm not really sure, right? Because you can't play 2 second basemen and 1 shortstop. I mean, you can, but it's not going to go very well. And that's kind of the position they're in once Story is on the injured list, which I just assume he's going to be at some point. So I don't know there's not an obvious solution. This would be a much better conversation if the second player were Marcelo Mayer, who is an actual shortstop and a pretty good one, but he's also constantly hurt. And I've got some real issues with his swing right now that I think he's just gonna have to resolve before he's ready. He's just not on the fast track with the other 2 guys. It's why he's lower on my rankings, but also he didn't even get to AAA last year. He got hurt right before. I think they actually called him up, like the roster move. He went to AAA, but he never played there, because then it was revealed that the injury ended his season. So, ideally for them, we're having this conversation on Labor Day, and all 3 of those guys are in the lineup, right? Anthony in right, maybe Campbell's at second, and Rafael is in center, and Mayer's at short. I mean, that's a perfect world for them, which is, of course, not going to happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about Hamilton is I'd heard that internally their defensive metrics are pretty good on him.
Yeah, I believe it.
Actually, the external ones are okay, but I don't know how much you've seen him. People said who've seen him don't like his actions or something, that he doesn't look like a shortstop or something.
Because his reputation going back to
was
the
good
draft, like he was always, it was like, this guy can play short. There's not much bat there.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's where he ends up, because stories long in the tooth for a shortstop. But another thing that's really interesting to me, so you have these two Red Sox at the top, you have another in your top 100, and we've got a story coming out soon about modern hitting development, and it's focused somewhat on the Red Sox, because this seems to be like pretty good outcomes for all these guys. And there is something similar, I think, about Campbell and Anthony. They both seem to have worked on their swing paths. Like they used to be kind of really ground ball heavy, and they're kind of getting away from that. They started, I think, both with a pretty good sense of the zone and hitting the ball hard. So they kind of are just now hitting the ball in slightly different areas. You look at a lot of the guys as they grow, and you have to re-rank guys, and you see them as they come through. Do you think that there are certain traits that are more innate and hard to shape, and other traits that are more shapeable? And do you think that comes into play at all in these rankings for Anthony and Campbell and Meyer?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a great question. And I think there are a couple of things those two guys have in common. They're tremendous athletes, like athletic. And I think a lot of people hear that it's like, can they run? Or it's not that. It's about their movements. Yeah, right. I mean, you guys watch a lot of games, right? You get a feel after a while, he's more athletic, he's less athletic. The example, I'm going to have to find another one because it's getting dated, but David Wells was a good athlete. He was a big fat guy, but he was a really good athlete. Like, he really fielded his position. He moved well. The reason he was able to throw strikes for so long, even with, I think we can call it a beer gut now because he's basically admitted that's what it was, but he was really athletic. He had good body control. And both those guys do. I remember I still have video I saw of Anthony when he was a high schooler. And I think I had him right in the second round, right where they took him, because the swing wasn't great, but he definitely hit the ball hard. I was like, he's athletic and he seems to have some idea of the strike zone. It's tough to tell sometimes these high schoolers, but I saw him at the NHSI tournament where they tend to see a little better pitching at least. And then I saw him again the next year. This was after he'd taken off and all the stories were out about the batted ball data. And I will never forget rolling in and seeing him for the first time. It was at Reading, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, I walk up the side and I see one swing and he scorches a line drive double. I'm like, please tell me he didn't please tell me he didn't look like that in high school and I just missed. And like, I got home and uploaded my video and I'm like back and forth, like, oh my God, did I just like miss the greatest swing? And no, he looked totally different. And the Red Sox people said he did this on his own. They gave him all the credit. He went home after the draft, after that fall, and reworked his own swing. I think Campbell worked more with the Red Sox people on that, but he's another one where I talked to the area scout who drafted him. He's, was bet on the athleticism because he only played 1 year at Georgia Tech. He was bet on the athleticism and the kid, the makeup, the intelligence, the ability to take instruction also, which is another thing that really matters. And it's why,
but that one's got to be really hard for you to see.
Yeah, it is. I'm taking their word for it, right? I'm taking a scout's word for it. Every organization wants to say, this kid's got 80 makeup. Oh, he's got the best makeup in our organization. I'm looking, I'm like, you've said that about 5 guys already.
It can't be 80 on all 5.
Right? This is not like Wobegon. They're not all above average, right? Like, this is just not a thing. But, and it's also often interesting when I talk to an area scout who didn't draft a kid and they're like, I love that kid. I think that kid's going to work his ass off. He's got great makeup. He's going to learn. That's to me the biggest thing. Like, you don't have to be a nice kid. Right. That's obviously, it's nice to know that he's a good human. You'd let your daughter marry him. That's a big old expression.
Yeah, but there are plenty of guys who are not nice guys who work super hard and get the most out of their talent.
Like, as long as you're not getting arrested, right? Right. It's like, I don't care if you're a nice human, but are you going to work? And do you have the capacity to learn? The capacity and the willingness. I guess those are really two separate things. Will you make changes? Will you make adjustments? If the team comes to you and says, we're talking about taking guys who are a little ground ball prone and trying to get them to put the ball in the air more. Pretty common. Dodgers have done that with a lot of guys, obviously, where, some players are not going to take to that and they're going to hate. I'm pretty sure Jake Bauers, after he was with the Rays, kind of came out and said, they tried to change my swing and he didn't like it. He didn't want to do it. I'm not criticizing him. I'm just saying those are things you need to know about a player when acquiring him, or when trying to work with him, when drafting him. Is this guy going to be able to take instruction? Does he have it up here? And then does he have the physical capacity to execute?
Like if you call their coach, like the coach might have some personal beef or not beef, like that guy or not like that guy
for sure.
A personal reason that has nothing to do with baseball, maybe even. Yep. And then on top of it, you could have guys who are yes men who sort of say yes and don't apply it or don't care or whatever, or people who sometimes say you're uncoachable. But what that means is, like, Corey Seager is quote unquote uncoachable by some people because he doesn't value their opinion. Like he has the people
makes me feel like I'm uncoachable too.
You're right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, is it Ron Swanson at the hardware store just saying, "I know more than you"? Is that?
Yeah, Seager will do that to a person, I think, because he has his swing coaches he trusts, and
Yep. That's good and bad, right? I hear about this all the time where it's, he went to his own pitching guy in the off season. I'm like, did it work?
Yeah, did he get better?
I'm fine with that. I mean, to me, the worst thing of all is where the kids are basically listening to everybody, right? I remember hearing this about Bubba Starling, where someone close to the kid said he's had so many voices in his ear telling him what to do with his swing. Like, he just doesn't know which way is up anymore. And obviously he didn't work out. And there may have been more reasons than that, but he just comes to mind as a guy who never found his swing, never did, constantly changed. Every time I saw him, he looked different. And what I heard was but I think he may have been one of those kids where it was like, oh yes, I'll do that. Oh yes, I'll do that. And change, and never got into a rhythm, never found one that worked for him. Honestly, that's the biggest thing. Maybe if he'd found one that worked, he would have stuck with it. But I can think of even a couple examples right now of guys who've done something with their swings or their deliveries because some outside source suggested it, and it made it worse, made things worse. The results are worse. It looks worse, but what really matters at the end of the day is what are the results? I don't have to love your delivery if it's working. Are you throwing strikes? Is your stuff better? Are you getting outs? Okay, well, I guess I should like your delivery.
It sounds like you were just totally in love with Roman Anthony, but did anybody else, push him for the crown?
I sent out, because most years it's pretty obvious. It's one guy or it's one of two. This year, I basically had 6, maybe 7 guys who are just the top.
Because some lists had Kristian Campbell at the top.
Yeah, he didn't get any support at all when I reached out to people across baseball. People who have a good sense of the minors, either because they've seen a lot or because they're in the front office and working on that side of things.
Hits the ball harder and has more defensive value. And
could play up the middle if you needed to. Yeah. Super athletic. The batted ball data is as good as it gets. People love the swing. I mean, if you're a swing guy, that's it, right? It should look like that. Walcott got some love, of course, because he's super young and seems to really, really understand the strike zone for somebody who's young. And obviously the kids from the Bahamas have generally, but we've seen some pretty polished players come out of there. They don't have a ton of baseball experience, not compared to kids from the Dominican or kids from Venezuela. So the fact that he adapted so quickly was pretty telling. Got some support for Dylan Cruz also, just because he's there. Like he is, and he should have performed better. He performed all the way through LSU, but and no matter how you look at it, the surface level performance, the batted ball data, it's fine. It's fine. He's going to be fine.
Doesn't seem like top shelf,
right? So he's where he is on my list for proximity.
I mean, I talked to Austin Riley once. Did you think he gets caught in between? There's his weird oscillation of his pull and oppo rates. It's just, he kind of remember he used to be wasn't he like an oppo guy in college?
Cruz?
Dylan Cruz, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. When it was this guy's got opposite field power.
And then I think people were like, pull is where the more power is in the big leagues or whatever. And then I just kind of feel like he's stuck in between sometimes. But Austin Riley figured it out, so it's not something that you can't figure out.
No, I mean, God, Austin's one of the best conversations I've ever had with any hitter. It was amazing. I mean, talking about a guy who understood his swing and understood his approach and was able to execute some pretty specific adjustments. And it's funny, I spent a lot of time on Cruz's just individual pitch data over the course of the year too, even before he got called up. I'm like, what's going on? I always thought Cruz would hit. And it's interesting that for a while it was fastballs up, Well, then he seemed to have closed that off, but now he's not. Yeah, and he's not now they're coming in, and he's got to adjust to that. He's not driving the ball to the pull side like you expect. Nothing's bad. He hasn't stunk. It's just
there still could be a chance of it clicking. It sounds.
Oh, absolutely.
He's sort of fighting them off in these different places. Maybe he can fight them off to the right places. And
somebody even threw at me. Is it because Wyatt Langford got there first and he's feeling the pressure? I'm like, I don't know, man. That seems like
he has enough pressure. The pressure is
right. Yeah, he was second pick in the draft, and the majors are like right there. They're just off screen, right? You're like, it's right there. Yeah. I don't know. I'm curious. I mean, the one thing I will say is it looks like he's just got a job, right? Your opening day, you're in the outfield, but probably in left field, but whatever it is, you have a job. I mean, I would say, kid, you're getting 400, 500 at bats. Just don't worry about it. Just go do your thing. Hit how you want to hit. We'll figure it out later. And just see if just telling him, just go hit. And can he at least make better quality contact, and we'll figure out later, work on which pitches to pull and which pitches to go the other way. So just let him get comfortable, because obviously we've seen so many very, very talented, very highly touted hitters get to the majors and struggle on that first exposure because big league pitchers are really good.
Yeah, it's the adjustments. That's the thing is the timetable to get to the big leagues has been shortened. And you wrote about this in the preamble. I read the preamble. I know a lot of people skip right past it. I read the preamble.
You're one of three. Yes, three of you read the intro.
You kind of indicated this was as hard as it's been to put together a full top 100. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons you mentioned is that minor league contraction and more aggressive timetables for a lot of players. And some of it's needs on the pitching side. I think some of it's being able to measure pitching differently and knowing guys have big league stuff, maybe even big league command a little bit sooner. So that also nudges guys up, but even hitters. And it's not just the Angels. Like we could make Angels jokes all day. But Dylan Cruz got to the big leagues pretty quickly, even for a very highly regarded number 2 overall pick college bat that mashed. And I do think if the big leagues are harder than ever, or the gap between the minor leagues and the big leagues is as wide as it's ever been, our expectations need to be lower, even for high-end prospects debuting. So even for the guys we're talking about, Anthony, Campbell, other guys are going to come up, they might not hit right away. We saw it last year with Jackson Churio. It took him a couple of months, 2 months really, before he started to look like the guy that is going to be a perennial first-rounder in fantasy and as a building block in Milwaukee for the next half decade, right? It's not easy. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes.
I actually thought you were going to say Jackson Holiday, who his first exposure. And I've been asked twice in the last week on Baltimore related, radio or podcasts, are you worried about him? Like, he's 21. I think he'd be in the draft this year if he'd gone to college. So, but he got, to your point, he got there really fast. And I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked about him a bunch. Obviously, like everybody knows what it's been, what he needs to work on, but it's just, he got there so quickly. And I'm not blaming them because he hit at every stop. He just didn't sort of run into an obstacle until he got to big league pitching. But it's that they get there so quickly now, and it just raises the expectations. Everyone thought he was going to show up and at least hit right away or perform right away. And actually turned out there were some vulnerabilities, and big league pitchers figure those out really quickly. And God, once they find you, right, that's it. You are not getting away. That's the
weirdest thing. We talk about this a lot, where like minor leagues, even swinging strike rates, usually swinging strike rates will give you a clue, but minor league strikeout rates for hitters, sometimes they poured over almost exactly, and a guy who has a 20%, he goes to the majors and has a 21 or 22, and you're like, that makes sense. Yeah. And then sometimes you have a Jackson Holiday where it's 18 to 20% in the minors, and he gets to the majors and it's 28 now? Like what, 30? Like what's happened? And sometimes swinging strike rate gives you a clue, because you're like, oh, it was 20% in the minors, but it was like a 13, 14% swinging strike rate. So like they were just kind of being aggressive and, making contact before they struck out. But sometimes it's what you're talking about is like a hole that minor leaguers couldn't like pick at.
That's how I interpret
effectively enough. And how would we be able to see that from the outside? I mean, it takes scouting, right? Like it's really,
that's to me, yes. The scout who'll say, hey, that slider that he's laying off down and away, big league pitchers are going to be able to locate that in or closer,
and he's
right? I mean, that's the biggest separator, because it's not that the big leaguers have just better stuff. There's lots of stuff guys in the minors. A lot. It's crazy how many guys in the minors. Somebody else I just wrote up, Chen Wei Lin in the Cardinals system, who hit 101 last year. And he's 6'7", which I've been to Taiwan for a baseball trip too. Like, I did not see anybody who was 6'7" while I was there. Like, when I saw that and its delivery works and all of that, he's a good prospect. He's not on my top 100. 20 years ago, if you threw 101, you were 6'7", you were just, that's it. You're on top 100. I don't care what else, right? You throw it between your legs, I'm still putting you on. Now it's just like, oh, you're another guy who throws hard. Okay, well, what else do you got? You get to the majors though, and it's, you get to the majors, it's guys who have command. It's guys who have command of a specific off-speed pitch that, I'm referring to breaking stuff and change-ups and split. Like, there's so many different varieties. You've got all this pitch design work now, where you can, they're calibrating specific pitches to move in certain ways. And I think a lot of hitters get to the big leagues and they just haven't seen it before. And it's really hard to have to make that adjustment. And also know you might be sent down to AAA tomorrow if you don't make that adjustment. Whereas that's obviously not on you when you're at any other level in the minors. You might be left in AA all year to make that adjustment. But especially if you're Jackson Holiday and your team's trying to win right now, they're like, can we carry this guy? The Orioles 3 years ago would have been like, we're just going to let him play through it. It's fine. Now, trying to win maybe the toughest division in baseball, that's going to be a challenge for them. If they decide to give him a job out of spring training, I wonder how much time they'll give him to make adjustments if he doesn't hit right away.
That's something we've been talking about on the Discord a fair amount is how hard it is for, Yankees prospects to break through. I was talking to somebody from the Yankees and I was like, do you guys have a player development problem? And he's like, dude, for our players to break into the lineup, it takes so much. Jason Dominguez at one point was like everybody's favorite, like darling, the Martian, coming up. Yeah. And I actually still think he's pretty good. And I think he'll be a good regular. But it took him this long to break through. He had to wait for Verdugo and wait for this guy and wait for this guy to flame out, And so it's just it's really hard. Some organizations like the A's doing their mini reset every 3 or 4 years. Part of their currency is okay. Now all the guys just get chances for full years. They get to just play for a full year. Yeah.
To me, I hope obviously they signed some guys this year and where just signed some veterans just so they spent some money. But I hope that they keep doing it. I mean, if I were in that front office, it'd be like, this is a grand experiment, right? It is all house money, right? We're playing in Sacramento. Who knows if anybody's going to show up? It's going to be hot as hell. Play everybody, right?
Yeah, I think they should do something more innovative strategy-wise even too,
Oh, I agree. I actually love that they took – it's funny because we joke Nick Kurtz was the high on-base percentage guy in last year's draft. That's I guess
Wilson was a little bit of a weird pick, right? I mean, that was the people where's he?
I thought it was a reach. I mean, they were betting on defense. And I think they were betting they could get him stronger, which hasn't happened yet.
Where did you put him?
25th or so, and they took him 6th.
Is he in your 100?
No, he was on the just missed list because he just
does
not.
He's not even on your 100.
No, he doesn't hit the ball hard at all.
He does not. Yeah.
No, and his defense went backwards. And so folks who don't know, he was the A's first rounder 2 years ago. Stack Wilson's kid. Wilson Sr. could really play shortstop.
Glove guy, yeah.
Yes. And so Jacob had that reputation at Grand Canyon. I saw him. He could play shortstop, and he was a soft serve hitter, right? Soft serve to the second baseman, soft serve to the shortstop, a little bit, and it's like, oh, that was 83. Oh, that was 87. You really got into that one. So he never struck out. And I get it. I understood the skill set. There were better players available on the board at that point. With Kurtz, it was like, no, this guy could get to the majors in a year, right? If he just stays healthy, he's a really advanced hitter. He hits the ball really freaking hard. Actually, the hardest hit ball I ever saw from him as an amateur was an out. Yeah,
why bother with Seth Brown anymore?
Oh my God, right? Let's go. Not to start the year, fine. Let Kurtz go AA. You want to AA, AAA for a little bit, a month here, a month there, and let's go. He could. There's a scenario where he's the third best hitter on the team in September. So why not just do it? You have that. That is a luxury of being a non-contending team in that market is you can do whatever. I mean, to your point, experiment all the way, do crazy stuff with your pitching, try anything, don't bunt, but try anything else.
You can wait longer on players. You can take chances on failed prospects and give them the run they never got before, right? I mean,
they're the quad A capital. Yes. They love quad A guys.
They do love quad A guys.
Florida's doing that now. Miami's doing that now.
Oh yeah. Miami's been fascinating because they're taking super far away guys, or like you said, some of these kind of out of favor-ish prospects. I mean, the reactions I hear from other clubs on a lot of their deals was, that's it. That's all they wanted. But I don't know it's going to work. I understand what they're doing.
26-year-old guys that like project well, Like
yes. Or the shortstop they got from the Phillies who was like 18, right?
Yeah.
Or people say, I had somebody tell me he thought Starlin Caba might be the best defensive shortstop he's ever scouted. Like, okay, wow. I get that. Okay, right? You want to take that guy? He's a little bit
like Jack Wilson offensively, though.
Yeah, that's the worry. That is absolutely the worry. You can pray that an 18-year-old is going to get stronger. What Jacob Wilson is 23 now,
that's
so
right.
The clock might be ticking. But you're right. I mean, that is absolutely a path that could happen for Caba. And so, but you're one of those teams. You can wait 5 years. You can take that guy. And you know what? If 3 years from now, suddenly you're contending and that guy has started to pan out, he's in Double A and you can trade
him again.
Yeah. I totally understand it. Even if I don't agree with each individual move for either of those clubs, I get it. And they should lean more into
an ethos.
Yes.
It's a plan. Have a plan.
Say what you will about the tenants. Never mind.
Yeah, right.
I want to ask you about Carson Williams, Keith. The situation in Tampa is a little more complicated now because they brought Ha-Seong Kim in as a free agent, but there is an opt-out for Kim. He's coming off a shoulder injury. You could play Kim at second base, depending on what else is going on with the roster. I mean, Williams passed the Double-A test with flying colors last year, popped 20 homers, stole 33 bases. Looks like a guy that's going to do everything fantasy players want. Mm-hmm. Do you think we see a lot of Carson Williams this year? Because one thing I've had a difficult time with the Rays is figuring out their timelines. They have been historically, even with different front office regimes, a very challenging front office to read as far as when they feel a player is ready.
And I feel like they don't rush guys at all. Even when it seems like they have an opportunity. Tell me if you disagree. I'm sort of making an assertion here.
Oh, they're super. Aranda's like, I know that's just, he's not really a top prospect, but like he's been there.
Yeah, but he's been in that system for 20 years.
Got a fourth option. Yeah.
Going back to the Nate Lowe and even going back further, like the Desmond Jennings era, like it's a ton of players over the years that I've been like, oh, he's ready. And I'm like, no.
Curtis Mead, it's still there.
Curtis Mead.
Caminero, they had him up in 23 and they sent him back down. I'm not saying they were wrong. It's just, you think the Rays, they're just going to play him now, right? They're just going to give him.
Do you think they just want him to be in the major leagues in their peak range the most? Like they want him to leave Tampa when he's 27 or 28. You know what I mean? So they just.
That's a good, I wasn't thinking that. It's a totally valid argument.
Just wait a little bit. They have him a little bit closer, just the peak years.
Yeah. Just to try to time it. My inference was just that they are trying to get guys as ready as possible so that they did to minimize the chances of that kind of initial struggle that we were just talking about with a lot of their guys. Yeah. And I would worry about that way more with Williams than I would with Caminero, because Williams, he's been a struggle for me almost since day one because he strikes out a lot. Like I think he has the highest strikeout rate of anybody on my top 100. If it's not first, it's probably second. But he does everything else, and he is really freakishly talented. Like he plays the hell out of shortstop. His actions are great
in the minor leagues last year.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of strikeouts. Was that across two levels? I'm not sure where I pulled 28
Yeah,
it was 28 was last year. Yeah, it's 31.4 the year before that. Though. Split across. Sorry, it was the high A mostly. So you're striking out almost 32% of the time at high A.
And he does. I mean, and it's not a ton of chase, if I remember correctly. There's some in zone miss. He swings really hard. So when he does hit it, there's power there. He's not the most physical guy either. I remember seeing the first time I saw him, because people in the draft it was pretty mixed, really pretty mixed, because he doesn't necessarily look the part of the 2020 shortstop. And he didn't run like this in high school either. The Rays actually worked with him on his strides just to get more speed out of him. They're like, you're a good athlete. Why are you running average-ish? And now he's like, you can get a plus running times out of him. So what do you do with a prospect who hits, it's hard contact. It is over the fence power. It's speed. He plays the most valuable position and plays it really well. and will actually take a walk, seems to understand it at the plate, but he strikes out roughly 30% of the time.
I think that's still a hit as is. Like, even if he doesn't get better in terms of swing and miss, it sounds like he's going to do enough damage.
Yeah.
You're going to run
That's where
12, 15% barrel rates. Fine. And the walk rate's going to be high enough where the OBP is not going to hurt you. So he's not going to get buried in the lineup. That still is a really good player. And this is where I think the athleticism and, you know, the ability to make the adjustments and being receptive to different things would come into play, because I could see Carson Williams, and the way you're talking about him, pulling something like what George Springer did. George Springer as a prospect was a 3 true outcomes, strikes out too much guy. And look what he turned into over time, right? So it can go both ways. Like, I think we get duped more on the low K rate guys, the 20% K rate guys that jump and never get it back. And I feel like we rarely unearth this guy struck out a lot in the minors, but actually got a lot better as a big leaguer, and that's what made him a superstar.
Larry Butler. Lawrence Butler? Larry Butler? What does he go
Lawrence
by?
Butler.
Somebody just threw that, asked me, I think in the under my A's top 20, can you think of a guy who really brought down his K rate? Didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
he was running 30% K rates in the lower levels, high 20s at a bunch of stops, and got under 20.
It didn't look good. Like, I would see him, and God, he missed that by a foot. And then he brought it way down. I mean, I'm sort of throwing it out to you too. I don't know if you guys have talked about him, looked much at him.
I talked to him this year, and he said that one of the big things was keeping his head still.
Interesting.
Which seems like something you hear from a high school coach. It's not like, oh, what? I never heard that before. I mean,
but I see
that's
these
some advanced analysis. Thank you, coach. But he focused on that, and he said he just saw everything better. So
wow. But you say that, except obviously I'm going through video and notes on a lot of players. Can I curse on this? Is that okay?
I think we have to cut it or beep it now. New rules, not our rules.
I see a lot of dumb-ish while I'm going through, where it's like, dude, you're stepping in the bucket. They tell little leaguers not to do that.
Right.
Or I'm watching, I'll throw this one out there. Jimmy Crooks, catcher in the Cardinal system, had a tremendous year at AA. Really high leg kick. And when he gets that foot down, it's late. And I think he's not picking up spin because he's so late to just get set. I don't know if that's easy to fix or not easy to fix. I don't know the kid. I can't really even speak to the athleticism. The only time I ever really saw him live was in the fall league, and catchers look like crap in the fall.
They're so tired.
They're so tired.
Yeah.
I even went back to my notes on him from that year in fall league, and I was like, oh, I said he looked tired. Okay, well, it's good. At least I recognize
Do you know that the major league catchers in the playoffs have like an 81 WRC plus?
I believe it. They're gassed, right?
Yeah.
That job sucks, right?
Yeah, it's really hard.
Oh my God.
Maybe you should have 2 good catchers and not just one guy that catches like 120 games and the backup guy that gives them a day off. You
figured it out.
Yeah.
You know what they're doing. Rutschman and Basayo. They're going to go into October and be like, we got this now. We got 2 catchers.
Might be really smart. One gets hurt. You still have a really good one.
2 catchers is better.
Yeah.
Why not 4?
I see 2 shortstops that could play in the major leagues this year that are in your top 10 that are right next to each other. Carson Williams and Jordan Lawlar. They seem very different. Could you compare and contrast a little bit?
I do think they're very different. Whereas I think Lawlar it's a little more traditional. The sort of I'm almost like recent traditional. He's like sort of more in the like physical, strong, hard hit, going to make a lot of contact, good idea at the plate. Very steady shortstop, good athlete. Maybe not as much wow on either side of the ball, just a really, really solid player. He's also...
Does the bat speed come back after the shoulder injury?
I heard from guys who saw him, he went to play in the Dominican Winter League. I even tried to see them. His team came up to New York and he was not in the lineup. I was there and then found out he wasn't playing. I'm like, you freaking kidding me? That whole weekend was like, I had fun in New York, but the weekend was a waste of time. It was very, very disappointing. I heard he looked great. Actually, his performance wasn't great, but scouts who went down and saw him, they're like, he looks good. He's swinging the bat again. It's loose. It's easy. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna hold on that. That was just very much a like buy and hold on there because obviously he was really good. I mean, he was in the big leagues 23 and he'd earned his way there, certainly. I don't know that it's a star, right? Carson Williams might be a star. Jordan Lawlar is he's more in the Dylan Cruz camp of this guy's going to be a good big leaguer. and probably for a while, but maybe there's just not as much ceiling. You're just getting more of the probability, which is a tough thing that I think you're ranking any kinds of players, whether big leaguers or prospects. It's how do I balance that? There's a lot of value in just saying you're going to be like a 2.5, 3 WAR player for many years. That turns out to be really good. It's just not as sexy as, he's going to have a 7 WAR season, be on MVP ballots.
Yeah, that description makes me think of Willy Adames as a prospect, maybe Willy Adames as a big leaguer, and even Dansby Swanson, because I feel like Willy Adames and Dansby Swanson, they're a little bit of like the Spider-Man meme for me. Like in terms of what they do, like they're good, they're very good players, but they're not elite players, and that's still extremely valuable to big league front offices. And Jordan Lawlar, so much of the story has been disrupted by injuries far too. If he could just be healthy, I think we'll see a lot of him in Arizona this year. I'm glad you kind of brought up Samuel Basallo. You got a number 3 on your top 100, and all the questions I was thinking about surrounded Kobe Mayo, but let's talk about both of them. I mean, this Orioles team, it's so top heavy with quality position players. At one point last year, I think they had 11 bats projected to be better than average by WRC plus all on the roster. And some of them are like kind of platoon guys, but still finding playing time for a young guy is very tough. So for Mayo trying to break through,
screwed.
Heston Kjerstad. I got a Heston Kjerstad question too.
Kjerstad put his face on the back of the milk carton at this point. I don't know where he is.
Send him to the Padres.
Are you a Heston guy? Did you like him?
Yeah, I think he can hit. Yeah. I think he can hit it hard. He's not much of a defender, but there's plenty of hard contact skill there. At worst, I think you got a platoon first base DH. I mean, stick him in right. It's not awful. It's just not good. Problem is the last thing they need is another left-handed hitting corner guy, right? Yeah, they're like so many of those lefties. I mean, it's the Colton Cowser problem, right? He can mash righties, and he's just never hit lefties ever. And really what he mashes is right-handers fastballs, but you can live with that. You can make a good career doing that. They need, if Heston Kjerstad is right-handed, he's got plenty of playing time, but they just sort of keep running into they're pretty lefty leaning.
Yeah, well, but the Mayo has the problem of like the infield's pretty good. I mean, I guess what do you think with Mayo? Is like maybe Holiday needs a little bit more time and Mayo sneaks in ahead of him, or?
Oh, I think Holiday, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would absolutely say so. So I was surprised. I mean, season hasn't started yet. I'm surprised that both Mountcastle and O'Hearn are still in Baltimore, because I would certainly rather, all else being equal, give any at-bats that Mountcastle is getting to Mayo. Just, I don't think it's going to be much worse production. It might be better, and it will certainly be better for you in the long term because you're helping Mayo develop, because he's kind of hit all the way up, and he is the one guy in that system where they've done a really great job. He's just gotten better and better and better each year. He was kind of tall and awkward, and people didn't really love the swing initially. He's not going to have a position. He was a high school draft in 2020. They took Kjerstad, went way under slot, signed Mayo over slot, and then a high school pitcher who's just never been healthy with the rest of the money. But Mayo's been like maybe their biggest player development success story the last 5 years. And next step is he just needs big league at bats. It's time.
He hit the ball 115 last year. He's got good bat speed, huh?
He is a big, strong dude. I was not, first time I saw him, like, it's not pretty. He's kind of awkward. I don't know if he's going to have the plate coverage to do that. He just got better every single year. He absolutely won me over with his progress, with his adjustments. And 115 will give you have my attention at that point.
But 20-year-old catchers don't. You're saying that maybe Basallo could make this roster at some point, but 20-year-old catchers, that doesn't happen usually. Do you think he's that refined as a catcher? Or?
No, I think that's the biggest thing he has to work on, actually, is the receiving. He can throw. He can really throw. Like right now, if you just put his arm in the game and leave the rest of him in AAA, that would work. I don't think we figured that out quite yet. And he's not bad behind the plate at all. It's just he needs work. And it's, that's another thing too. You get to the big leagues and guys have, pitches that move every direction, right? And appear front, right? Goes around the hitter and comes in, and right. You've just got to figure that is another challenge. In addition to all the other stuff we ask catchers to do, you are now catching better stuff with better location and working with a whole new set of pitchers who've probably worked with a lot of veteran catchers before and may have different expectations. That is a lot to ask of a 20-year-old. It's a lot to ask of a 24-year-old. So I think he will get some big league time this year because he's just kind of ready to do something, but I don't think he's going to even be like a main backup to Rutschman, barring some kind of serious injury. I think he comes up a little bit. catches once a week, get some pinch hitting, maybe at the end of the season, just to sort of gradually integrate him and get him working with pitchers, working with the big league staff, but with Rutschman as the primary. But if they can do that and have Rutschman not be an 80 WRC plus guy in October, right, that's a win. Any time you can give Rutschman off so that he's more, I was going to say healthier, but just more physically ready, less exhausted. Yeah.
And hurt. Yeah, maybe. So,
yeah.
I think the situation for Matt Shaw looks really good in Chicago, right? Like the Orioles, like, how do you make the pieces fit? No, what did they do?
The newest rumors are Bregman. They're working with Bregman.
That's the big thing that would make Matt Shaw's path for 2025 much more complicated, even though you can play other spots, but he should be the opening day third baseman as things stand right now, Keith, right?
Seems to be the plan, right? That has the trade of Paredes, who I never thought was a lot, he was fine for what they had. They needed him at that point. Trading him away just seemed to clear a path for Shaw, and they love Shaw. Everybody loves Shaw. Everybody thinks he can hit. My only real question on him is the arm's not great. We'll see what it looks like at third. And they're aware of it. They've worked on it. He's worked on it. There are certain things you can do to just, at least if he's really accurate and can kind of get into a good throwing position, he can compensate for that. And obviously, if he hits really well, no one's going to talk about his arm. I do think he can physically handle playing the position, like in terms of range, in terms of coming in on balls, etc. But it's about the bat. It's a great swing, hits the ball reasonably hard, puts it in that optimal launch angle range a ton. It's just like he's going to barrel a lot of balls. It may not be a ton of over defense power, but he's going to have a lot of hard hit line drives, a lot of extra base hits. So far, he's made it. It's another one. He just keeps making adjustments. They keep moving him up. He had a rough start last year where he was hitting the ball extremely hard and getting nothing for it. And then just as that started to see, got a little bit more of a sample size here, all the superficial stats started coming up, moving him up to AAA, facing tougher pitching, adjusted to it very quickly, actually. So, yeah, he's one of the only rookies I can think of anywhere who's got a job. Right? There aren't very many. Kumar Rocker's another one on the list where it's like, no, I'm pretty sure he's in the rotation.
Yeah,
should be, by the way. Totally
a lot of these situations are kind of like, let's see what happens in the spring. Let's see who's healthy. And there's a few things out of their control, or at least they have to have a good enough spring to kind of force the issue in the case of most of these guys. There are two teams that have had really quiet off seasons that have a lot of high quality prospects. I mean, the Mariners look really good overall right now. And I was starting to wonder if maybe the uninspiring winter they've had leaves the door open for Cole Young to show up sooner than expected. Colt Emerson's the better prospect, and Felin Celestine is a few years away. But I like what they've got in the system. Are they going to try and cheap their way to giving those guys opportunities? Because it will make their roster a lot more exciting quickly if they're going to be aggressive with some promotions.
I have just floated out there for a while. I think Cole Young is the guy they'll end up trading because he is, at least in terms of shortstop defense, he's behind Emerson and behind Celestin. It's not that Cole Young isn't good, but it's that they've got two better guys coming up behind him, and Cole Young is good. He's good. He is another one in that like Cruz, Lawlar, where I think he's going to be solid for a while, but I don't know that there's a whole lot of ceiling there. And I know that teams still value him reasonably well. Whereas with Harry Ford, there's another one of these Mariners prospects. There's just huge discrepancies because if you think he's a catcher, he's a really good prospect. If you don't think he's a catcher, it hasn't looked good anywhere else they've tried him. And he's
Henry Davis or something.
Yeah, not dissimilar. I mean, God, the worst thing they ever did to Henry Davis was try him at another position. It seemed to like ruin his life. And so I think Young is, to your question, do I think Young shows up this year? Yeah, probably. I mean, he's the only one of their top 100 guys who I think is reasonably close to the majors. All their guys are, and even if you just keep going down the list, I think the next three out in their system were Farmelo, who tore his ACL in low A, Cynthia, the switch pitcher, which is fun, but he hasn't debuted yet. Yeah, and I think they're still trying to figure out, right? He is really a right-handed pitcher who just happens to be able to throw 95 with the other arm, which is crazy, but it's like not a thing. And also, like, they're gonna have to change the rules for this if he were really trying to do that. And then Ryan Sloan, a high school pitcher who hasn't debuted. That's now I'm 9 deep in their system. So as good as the system is, I had it as the best in baseball. I don't think
you don't think Bliss is that great.
No, I don't think he qualifies anymore. I love watching him, also because he's my size. Like, really, I got close to him you were probably there the year he was at the Futures game, and I got close enough. I'm like creeping over. I'm like, oh, you're 5'6", dude. You are legit.
This
5'6". I see you, buddy. I love the fun size guys. They're just, there's a ceiling, and we can't reach it, as it turns out. He's fun. He's a solid player, but I don't think he's a regular. I think he's like a really nice bench piece, move him around a couple positions, hits the ball harder than you'd think for a 5'6" guy. But yeah, I could see Cole Young ending up, spending the whole second half in the big leagues. That wouldn't be a shock. It's also, if they're going to go trade for something, and if it doesn't, obviously all the rumors have been they were going to trade like Luis Castillo or one of the other starters or something. But if they were going to do a more traditional, we're going to give you some prospects for a big leaguer, I think that's the most, I hate to say expendable because it's not, it sounds like I'm denigrating him. I'm not. It's just they got other guys. They got a lot of middle infielders coming. And, he's got some probability, but the other guys have ceiling. Like Colt Emerson, if he just stays healthy, is a star. And he's going to run right past Cole Young if he just did, honestly, a full healthy season, and they're going to be neck and neck in the system.
Can we talk Pirates just for one real quick second?
Yeah.
I'm looking at Nick York at 50. I kind of liked that deal for them, the Quinn Priester for Nick York deal. I thought that was worth it. They need bats. Their arms have been pretty good. I love Thomas Harrington. I love Bubba Chandler coming through. And so Nick York, there's a fair amount that rides on him or Nick Gonzalez or somebody stepping forward and hitting. Other than O'Neal Cruz, I don't think they developed a major league average bat. So do you see a favor? Do you see that middle infield's like, do you think Nick York could play short? Do you think Nick Gonzalez can play short? Do you think they can coexist? Or how different do you think they are as players? And
didn't they also just sign Adam Frazier?
Yeah, but it's like $1 million. You can they
put him on the 40. That was the thing I didn't understand. He stunk last year. That was bad. If you don't think Nick York can do that, it was like 290 on base, 290 slug. If you don't think Nick York can do that, what are we doing?
I didn't really get it either.
The path of least resistance is probably to put York in left. I don't love that. I think he's fine at second. I don't think he's great. He will never throw well. The arm has gotten a little bit better since he was a draft pick in 2020 and had come off shoulder surgeries. He couldn't throw at all.
And kind of a crazy, some people hated the draft pick. And it was out of left field, sort of.
Completely. He wasn't on my top 100. He wasn't on somebody's, I don't know if it was Pipeline or BA, not on their top 200. It was one of those, they took who?
Yeah.
No, it was the pandemic draft, so crazy stuff happened that year.
Right.
But still, even after the draft, people were like, what the hell are the Red Sox doing? And then he had a great first year, terrible second year, has had some injuries, but last year especially got off to a slow start. And apparently the story I heard was kind of went to the Red Sox people were trying to do stuff with his swing. He was like, I'm going to hit the way I want to hit. And he took off. And he got to the Pirates and he just kept going and kept going and kept going. Look at his, and I know you guys have looked from, say, the listeners, go look at what he did last year. That guy went up to AAA and hit better against better pitching and kept it rolling. And everybody I know who saw him after the trade were like, oh man, this guy is it's hard contact. He's going to hit for average. Everything's a little better than you thought. It's a little more power. He's running a little better. He's fielding a little better. He's throwing a little better. Maybe he just needed some time. And maybe he needed to get out of the system, change of scenery guy, to, hopefully the Pirates give him some runway somewhere. I'm not a Nick Gonzalez fan. I've never thought that swing was going to work. I always thought it was going to be some power and low
is
BP.
he a little bit in his own head sometimes? The swing's changing a lot or
Well, he had the foot injury was that a year and a half ago too? And I don't know if that screwed with his swing. You could also be right. I don't know. But it's not working, right? He had a nice 2 weeks when he first came up last year and then was back to being Nick Gonzalez again. And so, hey, if he's the best you have, you play him. But I would rather give York those at-bats. And I don't know. The problem is I don't think either of them can play short. Gonzalez would be the better bet to play short because he actually did it in college, whereas York
was actually even drafted as a second baseman.
Because he had the surgery. I think the last time he actually played shortstop more than a game or two was probably as a high school junior.
Yeah.
So I would say try Gonzalez at short and see. I mean, God, if he could do it, he'd have some value, right? It'd be a very different profile if he could. I'm just very much in favor of giving Nick York that job sooner rather than later and saying, again, here's 400 at-bats, just go ahead.
Yeah, it is strange how they've done so well on the pitching side in the last few years, really becoming an organization that thrives in that area without figuring it out on the hitting side. I wondered if there's a world in which Joey Bart, Henry Davis, and Endy Rodriguez are all actually in the lineup at the same time, because Henry Davis can play in the outfield. At least they've done that so far. Bart looked okay last year, looked like a pretty decent pickup for the Pirates. And then Endy Rodriguez has at least dabbled in playing other positions. So by need, if that trio brings maybe 3 of the 7 best bats the Pirates have available, they may have to mix and match and use all of them. Am I projecting too much on Henry Davis making adjustments and Endy Rodriguez being able to hit big league pitching consistently, or do you think that's a realistic possibility?
I think it's a realistic possibility, in part because Endy can really play other positions. Like, he's really good at first. I remember he played a little bit of second base, I think in Double or Triple A, and the Pirates were like, why are you good at this? So, but could you do that, play him at first, and Bart and Davis probably switch off behind the plate? Bart's obviously a better catcher. Davis always hit until he got to the big leagues. And then, he really struggled the moment they started putting him in the outfield. They also tried to make him an outfielder in the big leagues, which I am not a big fan of with any player. Like, big leagues are hard. Let's not make it harder, right? There's no big, you don't get extra points for increasing the level of difficulty. So, if letting those guys swap out catcher DH a lot, one, do they both just hit better? And two, do you, back to Eno's point earlier, right? They're just healthier through the season. I think the Pirates are playing in October, but it's possible. Wouldn't rule it out. And those guys are stronger to the end of the season. Also, gives you a little more chance to evaluate, what if Bart or Davis beats expectations and creates some trade value where you can go fill a need somewhere else too. I mean,
everybody wants catchers.
Everybody wants catchers. Look at my top 100. There's catchers all over it. That wasn't like a philosophical choice. It's just that I started lining them up and talking.
I'm looking right now at Caro, Rushing, Salas right in a row, 15, 16, 17.
Right? Like, sometimes I do that. I'm like, did I put too many catchers in a row? And I'm like, that's not a thing. Stop, right? Just put them in order and stop overthinking this. I get in my own head. So, yeah, I mean, the Pirates could be in a decent spot like they did with Priester, right? Where I think they recognize Priester's fastball is problematic and they had plenty of pitching. So let's go flip him for a guy we really need. Then they did the deal for Harwitz, which I didn't love as much, but it was the same idea. We have plenty of pitching. We think we got the most out of Luis Ortiz. I think they were a little down on Michael Kennedy. I think they feel like one of the prospects who went to Cleveland, it's not, the projection isn't projecting. And so they felt like it was, good time to trade those guys. But again, it was trading from strength. We're good at developing pitching. We're not so much at developing hitting. Let's trade from strength to go address our weakness.
Let's get to a few pitchers. We're not going to be able to cover nearly as many pitchers as we did hitters, but since we're talking Pirates, let's talk about Bubba Chandler. I think Eno and I landed on Bubba Chandler might be better as a rookie than Jared Jones was. And Jared Jones was really good as a rookie, overshadowed by Paul Skeens a bit. So Chandler, I think, fits into what we were talking about earlier, the extremely athletic prospect, right? A guy that was recruited to play football and baseball at Clemson, if I remember correctly. So,
correct.
I mean, what do you see for floor from Chandler once he's up this year? And what's the long-term ceiling look like for a guy like this?
I mean, he could be a number one starter if he settles on a breaking ball that's even just consistently solid average for him. And he can spin it. It's not that. He just has not really had the feel for either. He's tried to throw both. Maybe he needs to pick one. Some of these are a little more the nebulous sort of player development things, but the fastball is crazy. It is it is a fun fastball to watch. That thing looks like it is just jumping as it approaches the plate. And his changeup is easy plus. And hitters, longest outing I ever saw from him was at Wilmington, which is high A. Wilmington was not very good that year. It was unfair. It was like those commercials where some big leaguer shows up at a little league field or something, right? That it looked like that.
You don't get nervous about guys that are changed up first?
No, because we've seen some guys.
Secondaries.
succeed with that. Like the Michael Wacha never had an average break, still doesn't really have an average breaking ball.
I guess
he's pitched a long time. Gossman, yep, split change, split. I'm fine with that. And because they'll usually get the other side out with that. I'm more concerned about the guys where it's fastball, breaking ball, and they just don't have that third pitch or it stinks. Because they often, not always, but they often end up with pretty big platoon splits that way. And
it's a fast track to reliever them, I guess. If you
yes, I mean that's always my assumption. You always say, well, we could try something else, change this changeup grip, try a split, try a cutter.
I feel like we see more people now with like 3 or 4 breaking balls than ever before. And sometimes I get nervous that the changeup guy can't spin it, and so then he's going to have trouble getting same-handed guys out. And it's kind of a reverse of the old problem. Is like, how can you be a starter if you can't get same-handed guys out?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's absolutely true. Yeah. And I mean, with a lot of those guys too, where it's like, he's got 3 different breaking balls. Yeah, but is any of them good? Right? It's fine to try all 3, but at some point you're going to have to try to throw one of them more. You have to pick one and really develop that.
Just one amorphous blob or not. But the flip side for me is Casey Mize. I still think he could maybe figure it out, but like he's fastball changeup and has not, and he throws a 89 mile an hour slider that Stuff Plus likes, but he tells me
I always
himself,
liked it too, visually.
I don't have a great feel for spin.
Yeah.
It's
some guys just
that
can't.
person tells you that.
It's really, I mean, I kind of give him credit for understanding that, because the number of times I was looking at this brand, guy low in the Cardinal system, just happened to be the one I was writing, so I keep bringing up these examples, named Saladin, who his spin rates are low on his breaking pitches, and I'm watching video and I'm like, oh yeah, well, that's what that looks like, right? Like that looks like a guy who is like, he is trying to will that thing to break as it approaches the plate. It is not happening. I'm like, son, whatever you do,
cutter, let's go cutter.
I would just, you're just call it a day. Like you can, it's always funny to me when I see a guy with a higher spin. I know spin rate isn't everything, but you see a guy with a higher spin rate on his 4-seamer than he does on his slider. Like, how does that happen? The pitch you're not even necessarily supposed to be trying to spin. Right. But I do see more and more of those, because obviously we're courting these high spin, high carry 4-seamers. And back to what you were saying, if you can do that and you've got a changeup, especially if you've got a changeup that's got a little fade to it in addition to just sort of straight down tumble, those guys can do all right. They might just be back end, but they can have a career. Logan Henderson with the Brewers, he's one of those guys where it might be all of a 70 changeup, and his breaking ball is not very good. He might be a 4th starter.
Chandler has a much better fastball or whatever.
Oh my God. Chandler is like, I think I've seen him up to 99, and I think he's got a better chance to have that average or even better breaking ball in the end. And he's so athletic, and God, he was a 2-way player until 2023, I think, was when he finally gave up hitting. So in high school, right, it was pitcher, shortstop, quarterback. And he is hyper athletic, and he made huge strides last year in terms of repeating the delivery and commanding the fastball better. Because when I saw him that long, I've seen him since, but that was just the longest outing I ever saw. He was his own worst enemy. The fastball was moving so much, he was having a hard time getting it into the zone. And so the Wilmington hitters, the smarter ones, are just like, I'm just not going to swing. We'll just see what I can get. Not a bad strategy. I'm a huge fan. He's just fun. I love, you guys know, right? Especially you, the way you look at pitchers, right? When you see a guy with stuff like that, you're like, oh, this is fun. This is why I do what I do.
I saw some Jared Jones last year before he was up, and the year before, and I was like, I think it's fine. The AAA, the ABS thing, like, I think that was screwing with him. I was like, this is he's nasty, and he's trying to deal with the computers right now.
Yes, right. See, a lot of guys do that, where it's like control. He walked 6 per 9. What the hell just happened here? Yeah. I think it does get a little bit in their heads.
What do you think about Andrew Painter this year? Have you seen him post surgery and? Yeah, 2 innings. You think it's all back, or? Stuff was back. Body looks good. Delivery looks good. He could still spin it, which is, always, some guys come back without their fastballs. Some guys come back and the breaking ball's not there anymore. His slider was still really, really good. He's still a giant. I think the only thing holding him back at this point is just how many innings do they want to put on him after 2 lost years? What do you throw, 10 innings or so in the fall league? I'm glad.
credit to the Phillies for just saying, we're sending him out there and he's going to pitch. It's not going to be a lot, but he's going to go. I think you need 4 or 5 starts out there. I wish more teams were aggressive like that. And look, Fall League will take any pitching you can send them. And you've got these guys who haven't pitched. They're coming off some kind of injury, surgery, whatever. Send them out there. That's the lowest stakes possible. And you have a ton of control as versus sending to like Venezuela or Dominican League or something where you don't have the control over how those guys get used. Like, it's a great environment. He was 96, 98 again. He's got it, changeup is fine. He's just going to have to learn to use it more. I wondered, I don't even know where I said or wrote this at this point, but would they have him work as a sort of, 3-inning starter early this season, build him up a little bit. And then when he's approaching the innings cap, maybe bring him up to just be a short reliever for the rest of the year. Cause obviously the stuff is probably going to miss major league bats right now. And this way you're still getting used. You don't have to shut him down in July because he's hit some arbitrary innings limit. Instead, you can still use him to lengthen your bullpen for a little bit and get him acclimated to the big leagues.
Yeah, Matt Gelb had a report. I think it was Dave Dombrowski who was quoted in it saying they don't expect Painter to pitch in the majors until July-ish. So they're really going to like slow play him.
That works.
And then bring him up and then just let him go, which that to me points more towards lighter workloads throughout the spring and then maybe 5 innings at a time in the second half of the season. Like that at least leaves the door open.
Jesus Luzardo will be injured, so.
Yeah, right. You're playing against the possibility of broken down starters at that point in the season too. But then you have him available for the postseason, which I think they would want him available in October for sure.
Yeah,
I'm very glad to see your number 11. He Stuff Plus is my little baby, and we updated today, and Jackson Jobe still looks beautiful in it. He is one of the best Stuff Plus numbers in AAA last year because we had some AAA numbers. It looks like it all fits together. Really big fastball. He has like kind of the almost a Grommian cutter slider, like that kind of 90 mile an hour slider thing. I just was a little surprised. I know it's only 4 innings, but he comes to the major leagues and he doesn't really get whiffs. And then I started looking at his minor league numbers, and I would have just assumed, if you asked me without looking, that he had 30% strikeout rates all through the minors. And he did have a fair amount of that. But last year he was more 25%. Mm-hmm. Is there something about how it fits together, or is he pitching to contact to kind of go longer, or what did you, is there any blemish, or is there any question?
No, other than he's been hurt, right? He's missed basically half of, I think, each of the last 2 years, non-arm stuff, at least, fortunately. And you just worry about any pitcher who throws that hard that young. He was 99 in high school with high spin. Yeah. He's got a really good changeup too. I don't love the delivery, but it's not a problem. Like, it's just not exactly how you draw it up. I do think there's an intent to go for weak contact there. I think he's got the pitches to generate weak contact, and I think that is the intention. I share your surprise a little bit. I definitely, if you just had me watch him a couple innings behind the plate and said, what do you think this guy's strikeout rate was this year? And if I didn't know who he was, I would probably have said like 30, 35%.
Yeah, right.
Like, the stuff is crazy.
Yeah.
Yes. And you don't see the ball super well. I mean, that's the trade-off. Sometimes the less than perfect delivery adds some deception.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hitters didn't like seeing him. I think I've seen him 4 times now. Hitters do not like seeing him. It seems like they get very awkward swings off of him. I give AJ Hinch a ton of credit for rolling him out there a couple times too. I think he got in 1 playoff game maybe, and he had struggled in 1. Maybe he got into 2. And I was like, you know what? This is what they used to do. Now I sound like, old man. I was a kid. I was your age.
Get their feet wet or whatever.
But it's right. Trial by fire. Like, hey, we think we're a playoff team next year. We expect you to contribute meaningful innings. You are going to come into a pressure situation. And then he struggled the first one. If I remember correctly, he struggled the first one and was better the second one. Great. Absolutely great. Set him up for some kind of major league role to start this season. Hopefully it's in the rotation. Maybe they ease him in some kind of bulk innings role because everything's about innings limits. And I mean, he has not pitched a ton, so I'm not totally criticizing that. But somewhere he should be on the big league roster to start the season. I hope he gets the full season in the majors.
Yeah, I mean, 95 and 2/3 innings, I think, last year before the little bits in the postseason. So I wonder if it'll be, I've used this example a few times in recent weeks, the Spencer Strider year 1 plan from Atlanta, where it's multiple innings out of the pen for a little while. As soon as a clear need opens up in the rotation, boom, he's in the rotation. Yep. And they've got a few guys that have pretty bad injury histories. Alex Cobb on a 1-year deal, Jack Flaherty, who they just brought back. Those two guys alone. If anyone else breaks down, Flaherty, then you got your spot.
Flaherty didn't look great at the end of the season. He was great before they traded him.
He signed an injury deal. He signed give me $10 million if I'm injured next year.
Yes. Yeah. So
that was a weird deal.
I agree with Derek, like totally. That's, again, I wish more teams did that. Bring them in. You're a long reliever everybody needs a long reliever, right? Okay. Starter went 4 1/3. You're going to come in, just bridge us, get us to the 7th, 8th inning. And then you get several days off and you work him in that way. And then when the need arises, because it will, you're in the rotation.
Yeah, and you're problem solving against big league hitters. You're working with big league coaches. Those all seem like very good things for long-term development as well.
We have you. I know we got to go, but and we didn't prepare you for this one. But I know that this is something you hear on the radio or in chats or whatever. Somebody in the back end of the top 50 that has a big up arrow on it. Somebody, I don't know, like I'm reading like Zero Hope, maybe.
Definitely him.
Briseño.
Let me find.
Anywhere in the top 100, I think. Who could be basically the next Sebastian Walcott? Someone that could be at or near the top of the list a year from now. The other Churio.
I mean, the other Churio, yes.
Made. Is that right? Made or Made? Made? Jesus Made?
Oh, definitely him. He was so good in the DSL and impressed people, right? Right. I don't put DSL guys on the list almost ever. And people were like, I don't know. That is a superstar. I think he's actually in the top 50, but Franklin Arias with the Red Sox, shortstop, 19, destroyed the GCL. I think he was actually the GCL, whatever, the Florida Man League down there. I think he was the MVP of that. I saw him in low A. Yeah. The ball, really comes off his bat well, and he can play shortstop. So just a guy who could, like, you told me he was going to be in the top 10 a year from now. Definitely could see that. I am just scrolling through Made. I think that's how he says it. He would definitely be one.
Hope gets a lot of love.
He is, first of all, he's a crazy athlete, a crazy athlete. But the word on him out of high school, he was from a tiny town in Virginia. The word on him was he couldn't hit, especially if it wasn't straight, he couldn't hit it. Give that kid all the credit in the world. And the Dodgers, by the way, for sticking with him, seeing him a little bit after the draft and saying, we want this guy. But he worked. And the pitch recognition, swing decisions aren't great, but they are so much better than they were.
But his walk and strikeout rates are pretty
good. And it's real power, and he runs pretty well.
Nice.
He would definitely be one. If Noble Meyer throws strikes, but that's right. Wait, I had one more, and I kept scrolling, and I went right past it. Oh, a little bit of an older guy, but Seaver King, who he was, for folks who don't know, 10th overall pick last year. Washington takes him out of Wake Forest. He was primarily center fielder, played some short, played some third, but he was a natural shortstop, And the Nats said, we're putting him out at short. He goes out to low A, Fredericksburg, and plays short. And pro scouts who saw him were like, what do you mean he's not a shortstop? Right? Like, there's no doubt. But he's the rare guy where post-draft, I was like, move him up. We have new information now. He looked really good at shortstop. He's a great athlete. He's interesting. He's like a little bit of a bad ball hitter. So I think his chase rate's always going to be a little high, but he hits them. And so I'm like, we'll let that go for now. You might have to change that. That's actually the hardest hit ball I ever saw from him was several inches above the strike zone. And he just tomahawked it out to left field at about 108 or so. And that's pretty impressive. You could do that on a pitch that wasn't a strike. He's athletic. He's got a good idea of the strike zone, at least in terms of what to swing at. And he can really play short. He could move up pretty quickly. And he might not be if I'm right about the shortstop, if everyone's right about the shortstop,
and Abrams
might not be in the majors.
Numbers are terrible.
Can we ask him when he gets back from the casino about what he thinks?
Could he rededicate himself and improve those numbers?
Wait,
he seems young and has the tools to be good as.
Oh, he definitely does. Yeah, he should be better. I completely agree with you, and I think okay, that's a fair time to question a guy's makeup, actually.
Yeah. And I guess the last question, and I promise we will let you go. This will not turn into a 3-hour show, even though we've got plenty of material.
Next time.
CJ Abrams, previously, prior to this, the casino situation, like what did you heard about his makeup, work ethic, all the things that we do care about and try to figure out? Because the way they described the incident and reacted to it publicly, at least, was more of a, okay, we're moving past this. It's not
they demoted him.
Well,
they
no,
demoted him AAA, right?
They did what they did as far as like the punishment for it. But Davey Martinez talking about it.
Red flag. Demoted.
Well, I think it was a huge.
We talk about it with Camilo Duvall all the time. Like, if you get demoted AAA after you've done what you've done in the major leagues and you're still like a usable player, like that says something.
And AAA wasn't playing. They basically just
they sent him down to like the Florida State League or something.
Right. It was just literally we are taking you off the major league roster.
Right.
You are in timeout.
That's what it was. So do you think this is the kind of thing that will be a good wake up call? Does everything you know about CJ Abrams point to a guy that will just say, okay, I got to get this together and I'm going to go back out there and keep building on what I've been doing as a big leaguer? Because it's a pivotal point for him in his career. I mean, I think this can go a lot of different directions. Yeah. Last year, he did take a step forward. He's above average with the bat for the first time as a big leaguer. If he can build on that, this is a guy that gets a 9-figure contract someday. Mm-hmm. But if he doesn't, this is a guy that's going to be twice traded before he reaches free agency.
And so I heard, I was sort of shaking my hand a little bit earlier. Like I heard mild questions of like, is he the hardest worker? A little bit of that in high school, a little bit of that after the trade. He's a player of color. I'm always a little wary when I hear that stuff about players of color because I think sometimes that label gets attached to them unfairly. And, white guys, scrappy white guys are just considered to work. Oh, he plays really hard. He's got a great baseball IQ.
Playing above his athleticism.
Yes. Oh my God. Does he wear glasses? Oh, he's cerebral. So,
but I got to wear my glasses more often. Sorry.
Not that I like hearing of a player do something like this, but it's like, okay, that's tangible, right? That is a judgment. It was a judgment call. It was poor judgment on his part. I think the Nets did the right thing. I cannot imagine them saying, well, now he's not like on the major league roster because else you're cutting off your nose to spite your face at that point too. You sent the message. It is on him to change. If he doesn't change, then he's going to derail what will otherwise be a very lucrative career. I also wonder if they're thinking like he's had some real issues defensively that I didn't anticipate when he was a prospect because he's so athletic and so quick and seemed to be able to play it, but he hasn't looked great so far in the big leagues. I wonder if there was also a lot of talk when he was coming up with the Padres and they had Tatis at short. Does Abrams move to center because he's so fast? It's also a possibility at some point, especially if Seaver King really does, if he takes off and he's a top 50 prospect this time next year and still playing short, it seems like that's within the range of possibilities at least. And then maybe they do have to think of something with Abrams. Like I'm certainly not giving up on Abrams, but that was a bit of an eye opener. It's like, oh, that's a pretty serious transgression actually.
Yeah. And it was just the first time I had come across anything that was like negative at all about CJ Abrams, but I'm not as plugged in and not hearing from everybody around him. So,
but, like I heard Carson Williams in high school was like, people were like, that kid's not tough. He's not that, he's not really, he doesn't really want to learn. I'm like, that all turned out to be wrong. I heard bad makeup on James Wood out of high school. So like a lot of that stuff I take with a grain of salt. When I hear something, and often I hear things I don't print, they're not public. Oh, this kid always, drinks too much or whatever, parties too much. Like, okay, that's at least there. We have something, right? That is an actual thing that I can point to. Not that I doubt scouts when they say that makeup stuff, but you were getting at this, probably an hour ago. Those can be pretty wrong. It's extremely subjective. It's very difficult to properly assess that. We as an industry are going to miss on guys' makeup a lot. So when there is something fairly tangible like that, I want to cling to it because I'm like, no, actually, we have evidence of poor makeup or at least, poor decision-making in a case like Abrams.
Yeah, just poor makeup can mean so many things. That's why you have to.
Yes.
What happened exactly? Let's pull on those threads a bit more. Keith, we appreciate all the time today. We know you're extremely busy. We'll let you get back to those NL orgs you got to finish up. We're looking forward to the rest of that series and look forward to catching up with you again later on this season.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Just like Eno and I, Keith is on the Blue Sky, keithlaw.bsky.social. Eno is enosaris.bsky.social. I decided to go dvr.bsky.social. That's a lot easier than my whole name. If you'd like to check out all of Keith's great work, the new stuff that Eno just put out today as a new piece out about Stuff Plus, actually, theathletic.com/rates and barrels gets you the best deal that we have going right now. So subscribe if you can. Smash the like button in this video if you made it to the end. Thanks again for listening. We are back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.